I let go of the door handle, and in that small moment, everything shifted. I could have lied, laughed it off, changed the subject. But I didn't. I just looked at him and nodded. This isn't a story about a wild affair. It's about something quieter, something deeper, the moment someone really sees you, even when you didn't know how invisible you'd become. I was 63. My life had always been simple, steady. I married Robert, raised our 2 children, worked part-time at the library, and spent my evenings with rose bushes and novels. There was no chaos in my world, no need for it. Predictability was my comfort. I thought that meant I was content. But there's a kind of loneliness that sneaks in even when everything looks full from the outside. It doesn't shout, it settles. And I suppose I'd lived with that silence for a long time. The moment everything began to change was a cloudy Tuesday afternoon. Robert had asked me to help out at a retirement party for someone at his office. I said yes, of course, I always did. The conference room in downtown Chicago buzzed with polite chatter and forced laughter. The air smelled like fading flowers and overcooked food. People I half recognized drifted by, talking about nothing that mattered. Robert was deep in conversation with the guest of honor, and I didn't want to interrupt. I felt misplaced, like a piece in the wrong puzzle. So I slipped out, planning to wait in the car. That's when I heard a calm voice behind me. "Need a ride, Mrs. Callahan?" It was Arthur Vance, Robert's boss. I remembered him from holiday parties. He had that polished, composed presence some older men carry effortlessly. Silver hair, gentle eyes, a quiet kind of authority. We'd never really talked before, only small exchanges at formal events. He was always kind, respectful, but distant. Yet that day, something felt different. Maybe it was the rain. Maybe it was me. I told him I was just heading to the car and waiting for Robert. He glanced at the sky. "You'll get soaked out there," he said. "At least wait inside until the rain lets up." There was no pressure in his voice, just quiet concern. And so, instead of leaving, I stayed. He glanced at the sky, the dark clouds curling low and heavy. "Looks like we're in for a real downpour," he said. "I'm parked just around the corner." "Really? I don't mind at all. Let me give you a lift." I hesitated. Something about the offer felt too generous, almost too kind. But my feet were aching in shoes I shouldn't have worn for standing that long, and the clouds above had turned the deep, bruised purple that always meant trouble. I nodded, softly. "Thank you." His car smelled like cedar and mint, warm and calming. The leather seats wrapped around me like a soft sigh, and he quickly turned down the classical music playing on the radio. The silence between us was quiet, polite. The kind that stretches out gently between two people who've only ever shared small talk, now unsure how to move past it. "You helped out a lot in there today," he said eventually. The way he said my name, Eleanor, caught me a little off guard. Most people didn't use it. Everyone appreciated it, I'm sure. I shrugged, eyes on the windshield as the first soft taps of rain began to fall. "I just tried to be useful." He gave a small, knowing smile. "That's what people like you do, isn't it? Always helping, always in the background, the ones who hold everything together." His words landed somewhere deep. "People like you." I didn't know how to take that at first. It sounded like a label, like I'd been filed into a category without asking. He noticed the look on my face and added quickly, "I didn't mean that in a bad way." "Not at all. I just think most people don't realize what it takes. How much women like you, who carry families, who never complain, really keep the world running." Something caught in my chest then. A breath, a memory, maybe just a feeling I hadn't let myself feel in years. I couldn't remember the last time anyone had said something like that to me. Maybe no one ever had. For most of my life, the roles I played, wife, mother, homemaker, were simply expected. Not celebrated, not even really acknowledged. They were just there, like wallpaper in a well-kept house, always present, rarely noticed. I let out a soft laugh, surprised by my own honesty. "It's strange," I said. "But sometimes I think I disappeared the moment I turned 50. Like I became invisible." Arthur glanced over at me then, just a brief flick of his eyes before they returned to the road. "You're not invisible, Eleanor," he said gently. The way he spoke my name, with such quiet certainty, made something in me sit up. It wasn't flirtation, it wasn't pity, it was something much rarer. Recognition, as if I'd forgotten I was more than just what I gave to others, and somehow, in that moment, he reminded me. The car grew quiet again, except for the soft, steady tapping of rain on the roof. I thought he'd let me out by the front gate, but instead he turned down the little road that led directly to our home. "You know where we live?" I asked, caught off guard. "I've dropped Robert off before," he said. "After the company baseball game last summer. You weren't home that day." I nodded, though I couldn't recall that at all. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to feel about that. But the fact that he remembered, that he noticed when I wasn't there, it did something to me I wasn't ready to name. When we pulled into the driveway, the rain had grown into a steady curtain, washing over the windshield in gray sheets. I reached for the door, fumbling for something casual to say. Something that might make the moment feel a little less strange. A little less charged. But before I could open it, he spoke. "Eleanor, can I ask you something?" Honestly, his voice was soft, careful. "And if it's out of line, just tell me to shut up." I froze with my hand on the door handle. There was something about the way he asked. No pressure. Just real. I turned to face him. "Okay," I said quietly. And then he looked at me, really looked, and asked the question that changed everything. "Are you happy?" The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. I blinked, stunned by how direct it was, how intimate. A strange warmth spread through my chest, something like hope. But right behind it came a colder feeling. One I knew too well. Guilt. "That's a complicated question, Arthur." My voice trembled slightly as I answered. He didn't rush to fill the space. He simply nodded, holding my gaze. "I think it's supposed to be," he said. I couldn't find the words right away. No one had asked me something so raw, so honest, in a very long time. People assumed, guessed, filled in the blanks with their own versions of what they thought I felt. But no one really asked anymore. I looked at Arthur. His face was calm, kind, a little tired. And in his expression, I saw something completely unexpected, a sort of mirrored curiosity, a quiet yearning that wasn't sexual or dangerous. It was human, a need to be known, to be seen. There was no heat between us. No burning flirtation, just a moment of connection that felt startling in its gentleness. "I should go," I whispered. He nodded. Of course, but he didn't restart the engine. He just sat there in the silence, letting the moment pass slowly between us. I opened the door and stepped into the soft rain. I didn't rush to get inside. I let the cool water fall over me, soaking my blouse, dampening my hair, trailing icy lines down my spine. It was cold, clean, and deeply confusing. Robert was still at the office luncheon. He wouldn't be home for a while. Arthur remained parked in the driveway, unmoving, thoughtful. I looked back once, just once, before stepping inside my quiet, dimly lit house. That night, standing alone in the kitchen, towel in hand as I dried my hair, something inside me buzzed with a strange new awareness. I felt awake. Sleep came slow. I lay in bed beside Robert, listening to the steady rhythm of his snoring, a sound I'd heard for decades. It used to comfort me, that soft rasping breath, like the ticking of a familiar clock in the background of our life. But that night, it sounded different, distant, as though I were listening to it from another room entirely. As though we had drifted apart not with malice or betrayal, but simply through years of quiet neglect. Of routine. Arthur's voice echoed in my head like a haunting refrain. "Are you happy?" No one had asked me that with such tenderness, with such sincerity, since I was young. Maybe not since I was a girl in her 20s, full of dreams and ambition. Back then, the answer had been easy. Of course I was. Life was full, messy, loud, joyful. Raising kids, building a life, laughing over burnt lasagna and late bills. We'd been partners then, Robert and I. Teammates. We'd pulled each other through. But somewhere along the way, life had grown quiet, polite, distant. Now, we moved through our home like shadows, passing each other with soft greetings and safe silences. Living parallel lives under one roof. The next morning, I moved through my routine as usual. Coffee brewed, laundry cycled, I watered the plants in the window, just like always. Robert kissed my cheek on his way out, muttering something about traffic and meetings. And just like that, he was gone. But I wasn't the same. I smiled that morning, not a real smile, a practiced one, the kind a wife gives as part of the routine. It barely touched my eyes. Then the door closed behind Robert, and I stood there in the stillness of our kitchen, holding a damp dish towel, the silence of the house folding in around me like heavy fabric. My phone buzzed. A text. From Arthur Vance. "Hey, I hope I didn't cross a line yesterday. That wasn't my intention." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering above it for longer than I'd like to admit. I wrote and rewrote my reply in my head at least 5 times. Then finally, I typed. No, you didn't. It caught me off guard. His response came almost immediately. Me neither. Just two simple words. But they struck me, clean and deep. Because I knew what he meant, and I suspected he knew what I had meant too. That strange, suspended moment in the car hadn't just happened to me. It had happened to us. I thought that would be it. A shared, fleeting encounter in the middle of a rainy day. A small ripple that would fade. But it didn't fade. If anything, it stayed with me. It grew. That feeling, that rare, disarming sensation of being seen, clung to me like the scent of rain-soaked leaves. It lingered in the corners of my mind, in the way I stirred sugar into my coffee, in the way I paused at mirrors a little longer. The following week, I told Robert the first was running errands and meeting an old friend from the library for lunch. I wore something that hadn't seen daylight in years, a navy silk blouse that once made me feel elegant and alive. It still fit, softly skimming the parts of me I used to love, the ones I'd long since stopped noticing. I took extra care with my makeup, though I insisted to myself it was just habit. Just a little self-care. Then came another message from Arthur. Would you like to get a coffee sometime? Just to talk. Nothing more. I stared at it for a long time. It felt dangerous in its simplicity. But it wasn't inappropriate. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't a trap. It was just an invitation. And I didn't say yes. Not right away. But I didn't say no either. We met at a tucked-away cafe I hadn't been to in years. It was the kind of place with creaky wooden floors, faded curtains, soft jazz playing overhead, and handwritten chalkboard menus with curling edges. Arthur stood when I walked in. He looked calm, freshly showered, his sleeves rolled to the elbows. His smile was warm, steady. Not eager, not expectant, just there. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said gently. Neither was I answered, and that was the truth. We chose a quiet table in the corner, near a window. We didn't talk about Robert, or the office, or even that moment in the car. We talked about other things. Life, memory, stillness. Arthur told me about his late wife, Clara. How empty the house had felt since she died. How he still woke up some mornings reaching across the bed, expecting her warmth. And how, in that brief moment before memory returned, everything was whole again, until the truth hit him all over again. Like a loss being relived, fresh and raw. I didn't try to console him. I didn't offer platitudes. I just listened, not as a wife, not as a neighbor, just as a woman sitting across from a man who was telling the truth, the hard, human truth. And it was beautiful, not because of the pain, but because of the courage it took to share it. When it was finally my turn to speak, I surprised myself. The words didn't feel like a choice, they simply slipped out, as though they'd been waiting inside me all along. I don't think, I began slowly, quietly, I've ever truly let myself want something that didn't make perfect, logical sense. Arthur looked at me, not with pity, but with an almost unbearable softness in his eyes. As if he understood something about me I hadn't fully admitted even to myself. That sounds exhausting, Eleanor, he said gently. It is, I whispered. We didn't rush. The coffee in our cups went cold, and still we sat there, two people who should have had nothing to talk about, everything to lose, and yet, we stayed. At one point, I reached for my cup, and his fingers brushed against mine, just barely, over the rim of the saucer. I froze. So did he. That spark, so tiny, yet undeniable, passed between us like a secret whispered in the dark. I'm not looking for anything reckless, Arthur, I said quickly, instinctively, pulling my hand back. Neither am I, he nodded. His voice was calm, even, but there was something else behind it. Something deeper. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe us, whatever us was starting to become, could be harmless. Gentle, contained, but the truth was, something had already shifted. Something quiet but tectonic. The air between us was no longer innocent. When we stood to leave, he touched my elbow, just briefly, as he held the door open for me. Thank you for saying yes, Eleanor, he said softly. I didn't reply right away. I just stepped out into the street, the air cool and damp with autumn, the light beginning to tilt that late afternoon gold. I drove home with the windows cracked, letting the wind tangle my hair. And as I turned into my driveway, I realized something startling. I was smiling, not because of what had already happened, but because, for the first time in a long, long while, I was wondering what just might. The days that followed looked normal on the outside, but inside, it was chaos, a beautiful, terrifying, internal storm. Robert didn't seem to notice anything different. Or if he did, he didn't say a word. We still ate dinner at 7, still sat in front of the TV in the evenings, side by side but miles apart, our silence more habitual than comfortable. But my thoughts were louder than ever. I kept replaying that moment in the cafe, Arthur's hand brushing mine, the way his eyes didn't dart or drift but stayed with me. Present, steady, seeing, not flirtatious, not dramatic, just, real. It scared me, truly scared me, how much it meant, how much I had missed that feeling, of being witnessed, of being heard. I tried to shake it off. I baked, I pruned the roses, I organized the pantry and repotted the lavender. But the silence of the house, once soothing, now felt heavier. And the hours, once benign, began to stretch unbearably long. But late at night, when the house finally stilled and the only sound was the soft, consistent hum of the refrigerator, I found myself retreating to the den. Just me, the faded armchair, and the warm glow of the old lamp beside it. And in that quiet, I would replay our conversations. Not just the words, no, it was never really about the words. It was the feeling of them. The way Arthur saw me. Not in fragments or through the filter of expectation, but wholly, curiously, as if I was still unfolding. As if there was something worth discovering. It felt, strangely, like I had stepped through a door I didn't even know existed, into a room within myself I had forgotten long ago. A room with windows, with light. So when Arthur texted again, I didn't hesitate. Greater than, I found this beautiful spot by the lake. Quiet, peaceful, want to go for a walk sometime this weekend? I replied almost instantly. What time? It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind of day that hovered between serenity and sorrow depending on how you carried your heart. I wore a sweater and jeans, soft and familiar. Not intentional, I told myself. At least that's what I tried to believe. He was already there when I pulled up, leaning casually against the hood of his car, hands in his pockets, face turned toward the lake. The wind off the water stirred his hair and mine, and the sky was that pale, silvery gray blue that made everything feel softer. Like the world was trying to whisper instead of shout. We walked quietly at first, each step pressing down on the dry leaves that crackled softly beneath our shoes. The scent of pine lingered in the air, crisp and sharp, threaded with something faintly sweet. Damp earth, maybe, or the last of the wildflowers clinging to the edge of the season. Then, his voice, low, thoughtful. Do you ever wonder what your life would look like, if you'd made just one different decision? I turned to glance at him. Which one? Any of them, he said. A missed opportunity, a conversation you never had. I stopped walking, and slowly, so did he. Why are you asking me this, Arthur? I asked, my voice more breath than sound. He turned to face me, his expression quiet and open. Because I see you thinking about it, he said. Every time we talk. My throat tightened, painfully, unexpectedly. But not with guilt, not even with regret. It was something deeper, a quiet ache, a strange, unfamiliar longing that made the air feel too still, too full. I didn't come here to do anything wrong, I whispered. The words came out like a confession, soft and desperate. I don't want to betray anyone. And I meant it. With all of me, I meant it. But what I didn't say, couldn't say, was that sometimes betrayal doesn't begin with touch. Sometimes it begins with being seen. You haven't, Arthur said softly, his voice a gentle caress against the rustling wind. Not yet. The wind off the lake picked up, cooler now, bolder, tugging at my sweater, stirring the air between us. A loose strand of my hair danced across my cheek. I reached up to fix it, but his hand was there first. Fingertips grazed my temple as he tucked it back behind my ear. A simple gesture, unremarkable on its own, and yet, my breath caught. My entire body responded, not with lust, not even desire in the way I once knew it, but something far deeper, recognition, yearning, the ache of having been untouched in tenderness for far too long. I took a small step back, instinctively, my heart pounding like I had been caught doing something forbidden, even though we hadn't done anything at all. I'm married, Arthur, I said, the words rushed, fragile. As if I needed to remind not just him, but myself. As if saying it out loud could anchor me back to the ground. I know, Helen, he said, calm, steady, as if he wasn't asking me to forget it. Just not to hide behind it. You're young, I added, another flimsy defense I already knew he'd dismiss. He offered me a small, melancholy smile. I'm not that young, he said. Then, after a pause. And you, Helen, you're not old. You're more alive than anyone I know. That caught me off guard. I didn't know what to do with it, the power of that statement. The unbearable truth of it. We sat on an old wooden bench, the kind that creaks when you shift your weight. The lake stretched out before us, vast and shimmering, the sun descending into the horizon, casting long, golden streaks over the surface. I watched the light dance on the water. Then I whispered, finally. Why me, Arthur? He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, looking out at the lake, then at me. Because you carry your silence like it's something you've earned, he said. Because you laugh with your eyes long before your mouth does. Because the first time I saw you, you looked like you were holding the entire world together with a single, fragile thread, and a very, very tired smile. I closed my eyes. No one had ever said anything like that to me before. Not in 20 years of marriage. Not in a lifetime of trying to be what everyone needed. His words settled in my chest like warmth after a long, bitter cold. They didn't heal me, but they saw me. We didn't kiss. We didn't even touch again. But something passed between us on that bench. Something unspoken, something irreversible. When I walked back into the house that evening, Robert was where I'd left him, slouched on the couch, a beer dangling in his hand, the television screen flickering with a baseball game. He barely looked up. Hey, babe, he muttered. Everything okay? Yeah, I said, voice low. Just needed some fresh air. He nodded, his attention already drawn back to the game. I stood there in the doorway for a long time. Watching him, watching the way the light from the screen danced across his face. Noticing, suddenly, how much distance could exist in the space between two people who used to be in love. And I wondered, quietly, achingly, how love could die so slowly, so quietly. That you didn't even hear it leave. Not until someone unexpected came along. And made you feel it again. I think about you, Helen. The words hung between us, fragile and trembling in the air like a soap bubble. Too beautiful to touch, too dangerous not to. I stared at him, at the honesty in his eyes, at the slight furrow in his brow that told me this wasn't casual, wasn't rehearsed. This wasn't a man playing with the idea of affection. This was a man already caught in it. I opened my mouth, but no sound came. Because I did too. Every morning, every quiet afternoon, every empty space in my home where a conversation should have lived, he was there. I think about you, too, I said softly, finally. The tomato in my hand was still there, forgotten, firm and red and utterly irrelevant. Arthur's shoulders dropped slightly, as if a tension had released in him, as if my words had unlocked something he hadn't even realized was clenched. I didn't plan to see you today, he said, and there was something almost boyish in his voice, something unguarded. But I walked in and there you were, and it felt like, he paused, shook his head slightly, embarrassed. Like it was supposed to happen. My heart beat louder in my chest than the clatter of carts, louder than the voice over the loudspeaker announcing a sale on pasta. I glanced down at his basket. Apples, bread, a bottle of wine, simple things, uncomplicated things. We weren't simple, we weren't uncomplicated. I don't know what to do with this, I admitted, my voice low. Neither do I, he said. But I know what it isn't. It's not casual, it's not careless, and it's not going away. I nodded, staring at the floor now, afraid to let my eyes meet his for too long. I should finish shopping, I whispered. He took a breath. Yeah, me too, but neither of us moved. And then, quietly, he reached into his basket, pulled out a folded receipt and a pen from his jacket pocket. Wrote something, handed it to me. I don't want to pressure you, he said, but if you ever want to walk again, or just talk, you can call me. I took the slip of paper. My fingers brushed his. The same way they had over the saucer at the cafe. The same current passed through. He nodded once. Take care, Helen. And just like that, he turned and walked away. I stood there for several more minutes in the produce aisle, holding a tomato in one hand and his number in the other. And I realized something terrifyingly simple. I hadn't felt this alive in years. And I didn't know whether that was salvation, or betrayal in slow motion. I found myself replaying our conversations over and over again. Not just the words, really, it was the feeling of them. The feeling of being seen. It was as if I had inadvertently stepped through a door I hadn't known existed, into a room within myself I had long since forgotten. The next time Arthur texted me, I didn't hesitate. I found this beautiful spot by the lake, his message read. Quiet, peaceful, want to go for a walk sometime this weekend? I typed back, what time? It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind of day that could tip either way, lazy and peaceful, or heavy with melancholy. I wore a soft sweater and jeans. Not intentional, I told myself. At least, that's what I tried to believe. He was already there when I arrived, leaning casually against the hood of his car, hands tucked in his pockets. The wind off the lake was light, and the sky was that pale, silvery blue-gray that made the world feel soft, quiet. We walked in silence at first. Birds chirped in the trees. Dry leaves crunched beneath our feet. The path curved along the water's edge, the air sharp with the clean scent of pine and something sweet in the breeze. "Do you ever wonder," Arthur said finally, his voice low, "what your life would look like if you'd made just one different decision?" I looked at him. "Which one?" "Any of them," he replied. "A missed opportunity. A conversation you never had." I stopped walking and turned to face him. "Why are you asking me this, Arthur?" He looked at me, his voice calm but clear. "Because I see you thinking about it, Helen. Every time we talk." My throat tightened, not from anger, but from something deeper. A mixture of grief I thought I had already buried and a new, unfamiliar longing. "I didn't come here to do anything wrong, Arthur," I whispered. "I don't want to betray anyone." "You haven't," he said gently. "Not yet." The wind picked up. A strand of hair blew across my face, and before I could move, he reached out and tucked it behind my ear. It was such a simple gesture, and yet my body responded as if it had been yearning for that small tenderness for years. I stepped back instinctively, heart pounding. "I'm married, Arthur," I said, as if reminding myself of something that was starting to feel less solid. "I know, Helen," he said, his gaze steady. "You're young." "I'm not that young," he replied with a small, sad smile. "And you're not old. You're more alive than anyone I know." I didn't know what to do with that, with the truth of it, the weight of it. We sat on a weathered bench facing the lake. The sun had begun its slow descent, casting golden light across the water. I finally asked, "Why me, Arthur?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, thoughtful. "Because you carry your silence like it's something you earned. Because you laugh with your eyes before your mouth does. Because when I first saw you, you looked like you were holding the whole world together with one thread and a tired smile." I closed my eyes, overwhelmed. No one, not in a lifetime of being loved, had ever seen me like that. Not like him. We didn't kiss. We didn't touch again. But something irreversible passed between us that evening. When I got home, Robert was on the couch, a can of beer in hand, watching baseball. "Hey babe," he said without looking up. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just needed some fresh air." He nodded and turned back to the screen. I stood there a long time, watching him. And it hit me, in the quietest, saddest way, how love can fade so gently, so silently, that you don't even know it's gone, until someone else comes along and makes you feel it again. The week that followed felt like I was living on the edge of something both terrifying and beautiful. I moved through my routines, laundry, phone calls with the kids, dinner, but my mind kept drifting back to the lake, to that bench, to Arthur. We hadn't planned to see each other again. But I felt him everywhere. In the wind, in the ache I carried now, not just grief, but longing. I began noticing Robert again, the mechanical way he chewed, the absence in his gaze, how he never asked how I was. And how I had stopped expecting him to. It wasn't anger, just distance. A quiet, vast, unbridgeable distance layered slowly over time. Then, 3 days later, I ran into Arthur at the grocery store. Of all places, I was checking tomatoes when I heard him behind me. "Still the best eyes in the room, Helen." I turned too quickly, heart racing. He wasn't teasing, just watching me, softly, waiting. "Arthur," I said, breathless. "You scared me." "Didn't mean to," he said, glancing at the small basket in his hand. I wasn't sure I'd see you again." I wasn't sure either. The grocery store hummed around us, carts rolling, music playing, someone asking where the eggs were. He cleared his throat. I think about you, Helen." His words hit me like a weight on my chest. "I know this isn't sustainable, Arthur," I whispered. "This thing between us, it can't go where it wants to go." "I know," he said. "But that doesn't mean it wasn't real." We stood in silence. Then I nodded. "Walk me to my car." Outside, the air smelled like rain. We walked without speaking, like always. At my car, I turned to him. "I can't be someone who lies, Arthur." "Not to him, not to myself. I would never want you to be," he said gently. "But I needed you to know. You woke something up in me. Something I didn't think I could ever feel again." Tears slipped out before I could stop them. "You did the same for me," I said. He stepped forward and held me. Just once, not with passion, but with presence. His arms around me, my cheek on his shoulder. and the ache of truly letting go. Then he stepped back. "Goodbye, Eleanor," he said, voice thick. "Goodbye, Arthur." He walked away without looking back. I sat in my car a long time, watching his taillights fade from the lot, and from my life. I didn't cry again. I just sat with the truth, painful, but somehow liberating. When I got home, Robert was in the backyard, fiddling with the grill. The scent of charcoal and lighter fluid lingered. "Hey," he said, wiping his hands. "I thought we'd have burgers. Like old times." I nodded. "That sounds nice, Robert." He looked at me a little longer than usual. "You okay, Helen?" And for the first time in a very long time, I told him the truth. A different kind of truth. "I'm not sure," I said. "But I think I'm getting there." He didn't press. He just handed me a cutting board. "Wanna chop the onions?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "I can do that." We stood side by side in the kitchen. Not healed, not fixed, but present. And that, for now, felt like a beginning. I never saw Arthur again. But sometimes, when the wind stirs or I hear a soft melody, I remember. Not as temptation, not even as regret, but as a reminder that I'm still here, that I can still feel, that even in a life that felt like it had passed me by, I could still wake up. "Robert," I said, my voice quiet but certain. "But I want to be." We stood there in silence as the sky above us turned a deep, hopeful orange, the kind of color that feels like it's whispering promises. It wasn't closure. Not exactly. It wasn't an ending, or a new beginning either. It was just a moment. A single, honest moment. And sometimes, I've come to believe, those moments are all we truly get, but they are enough. Enough to stir something inside us. Enough to wake us up. They remind us we're still here. Still capable of feeling, of choosing, of changing, even after all this time. It's a profound lesson, isn't it? That the most life-altering journeys don't always begin with someone new, but with the bravery to finally reintroduce yourself to the person you were always meant to be. Thank you for walking through this intimate and emotional journey with us, a story not about scandal or betrayal alone, but about awakening, honesty, and the quiet power of being seen. In Helen's silence, in her moments of stillness, many may find echoes of their own hidden aches and unspoken desires. Sometimes, it takes someone unexpected not to change our lives, but to remind us that we're still alive inside them. To every reader who stayed until the last word, thank you. Thank you for holding space for the tender parts of this story, for allowing the complexity of human emotion to sit beside you. Your time, empathy, and reflection mean more than you know. Disclaimer: this story is a work of fiction created for the purpose of emotional reflection and storytelling. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. The narrative is not intended to encourage infidelity or justify emotional betrayal, but to explore the often unspoken realities of emotional disconnection, longing, and self-rediscovery within relationships. If this story stirred something within you, please remember, seeking help, therapy, or honest communication can lead to healing that fiction can only begin to imagine.